Well, today on Mr. Rotter's Neighborhood, I get back on something I've been putting off for a long time, probably about 2 years. When I did my buddy Gerald's 70 Stage 1 carburetor that he had picked up off of eBay or wherever he got it from, and then repaired the unrepairable, it brought to my mind that, hey, I got one just like it, and it's completely just as unrepairable, if not worse. But can I make it happen? So what I did was I searched around. Well, Gerald had told me something that was pretty interesting. See, the air horn on my Stage 1, my 71 Stage 1 Service Replacement Carburetor had been damaged and actually broken. So he had told me, he said, hey, you know, you can buy those air horns. It's the same as a 4-speed car. And I'm like, really? So then I looked on eBay and I found a 4-speed Buick carburetor, and I looked in the pullover enrichment holes were below the air blades on the secondary air doors. So I decided, well, shit, I'll buy it. So I bought that thing and shipped it here, and I have been excited about it ever since. So I decided we're going to do a full-blown Quadrajet rebuild and try to save the Stage 1 Service Replacement Carburetor that I got from 1971. And there is some significant problems with the thing, right? I'll get the camera flipped around and I'll show you all where we started and what we got. And if you want to go back and watch the original video, it's called the Holy Grail Stage 1 carburetor. It's kind of a spoof. There's actually, I have a Stage 1 stunt double in there. So it did get a lot of people riled up where you'd have to watch the video. It's just funny, and it was meant to be funny. And I had a piece in there that was just ridiculous and fun. So let me get the camera flipped around and I'll show you what I got going on. Today we're going to work on the base plate, how to repair a base plate correctly.
Warning, Will Robinson, warning.
Now, warning, okay? Do not remove those screws just by turning them out. The screws that hold these throttle blades in are swedged on the far end of the engine so that they don't back out and fall into your engine and ruin it, okay? The proper way to remove those throttle blades is to grind the swedge portion of the screw off, and then they'll actually easily come out. If you try to take them out without taking the swedge portions off, they'll normally break off, and then you'll be left with screws that you got to try to get out of the throttle shafts. So I probably should have said that at the beginning, and I will cut and paste this right into the beginning with a big giant warning and disclaimer.
Get back to work, you slackers.
So just to prove that I'm a regular guy, here's my pan. It's actually an oil drain pan and multiple cans of carb cleaner. I'm doing it just like you because, well, that's how I do it. I can blast it with some soda material, but I'd like to preserve as much of the original finish as possible. There's not much left because it is crusted. If you look at this 71 Stage 1 carburetor, originally in the other video that I did, it was a rusted pile of crap. It sat my dad found it in the junkyard in 1984, and it sat with the hood open on the car for like months, okay? And this is most of the stuff that was out of it. I mean, some of it looks okay. I could probably blast it and reuse it, but it is really, really rusted. Now, just to give you an idea of how bad it really was, this is the base plate, okay? And I tried to remove the shafts out of it and use as much stuff as I could from it or repair it, and it just wasn't going to happen. You can see there's a screw stuck in it that broke off. You cannot get it out. None of the shafts turn. They're rusted solid. This thing sat with water in it for probably 10 years or something. You cannot turn that stuff. When I was taking it apart, most of the screws were breaking off more than they were coming out, and it was just a horrible mess. So I decided to just have fun and make fun of the disassembly on the video. But with that said, there's my pile of scrap parts, here's what I actually have. Okay, so here's the main body from the Stage 1. You can see the white corrosion in there. That's a lot of aluminum that's corroding. I will have to spend some time cleaning it up, and trust me, I already have like 2-3 hours in cleaning this up. The big downside to this carburetor is this. Okay, the Welsh plug's on the bottom, had this one on the, this is, I guess is the driver's side, had completely rusted out until it had a white blob coming out of it. And I ended up just picking at it and it fell out. So there is a simple way to fix these. Is what you do is you thread them. Generally use a 8/32 tap, and you thread them, and then you put a countersunk screw in there and JB welded it into place. But you got to cut the threads off to where it's only like 3 or 4 threads down, so it doesn't impact the fuel flow. Well, this one was so corroded that when I ran an 8/32 tap down in there, or 8/32 tap, there wasn't enough left for the screw to even bite on. So I had to go up to the next size, which is 10/32. Okay, so it's machine screw 32 threads per inch, and that's what it's tapped at now. It still seems to fit in there okay, but the screw head is considerably bigger, so I will have to repair that. Now, we're not going to do the whole main body and air horn and all that stuff today. Today we're just going to do the base plate, and I'm going to show you how to take two and make one, and we're going to do some interesting stuff. Now, the air horn, okay, this is the one off the 4-speed carburetor. And if you look at it, all right, let me show you the stage 1 first so that you have a frame of reference. This is what was left of my stage 1 air horn, okay? It was just as rusted and corroded as the rest of the carburetor, and it's been cleaned for hours and hours and hours. The problem was someone had tried to remove the linkage here for the secondary air door without taking any of the choke stuff off, like a moron. And they tore up this entire, mangled this shaft to death, right? Well, when they did that, they actually cracked the air horn. Okay, you can possibly see it there. It's bent up and cracked the air horn. Well, unfortunately, this is a stage 1 air horn that is virtually proprietary to the stage 1. It makes things really difficult to try to fix that. Now, I can probably have that welded up. I'm not entirely sure, and I'm going to try to save this one if possible. But here you go. You see, there's your POE hole, which is the pullover enrichment hole, is right here. Okay, let me get my fingers and everything to work together. That's your pullover enrichment hole. Normally, it's up here in this little tower. All right, and the stage 1 has POE holes here. So I'm like, well, good, we got the 4-speed's going to be the same. So what do? I grab this 4-speed carburetor off of eBay, and lo and behold, here's your POE holes. Just like on the stage 1, they're below the secondary air door. Wow, great, what a cool piece. All right, so you know what? Let me look at it all over and make sure it is the same. So I put them side by side, just like we're going to do today. Okay, so, and I've run into this before. Air bleeds. What size are the air bleeds? Well, they're fairly big. If you look at the air bleed here. Okay, come over to your 4-speed one. Oh man, they're really, really small. Right? Not a problem, because you just run a drill bit down in there in a pin vise and open that thing up to the size that you need. You find out what size that is with your pin vise and a couple of drill bits, and you drill this one to the same size. Here's the problem. You see that little other brass thing there? I believe that's probably a different air bleed. That's another air bleed for the main. This one does not have one. So it is not exactly the same. All right. So now I'm in a world of, oh geez, what do? Do I repair this air horn? Or do I epoxy these holes and fill them in, and it's still not a stage 1 air horn, right? Okay, well, besides that, you have this vent tube is not cut off like the stage 1 is cut off. But that's really about the only differences. I'm kind of reluctant to take this here out because it is held in with a pin. It's got a roll pin right here, but because it's cracked at the top, I'm afraid it doesn't have enough strength for me to knock that roll pin out. I can probably repair it, but we'll see. Well, that's further down the road. That's what we're going to do. We're going to take two and make one. Now, I've already got I've had to take two and make one on the choke assembly. It was all bent and mangled because of Dingleberry trying to pull the shaft out that runs the secondary air door without taking the choke assembly off. I got this base plate here, and I've already taken two and made one on this throttle shaft. I had to remove the throttle shaft because the linkage was so freaking rusted to death that I couldn't do anything with it. So I took everything from the stage one and I grafted it onto this throttle shaft here that came with the 354 speed. And then what you do is, right here is normally, like you can see this weld I got there, it's normally a swedged piece of flat steel. Okay, so you just grind that off and then you pull all these pieces off in order, and then you clean it all up, reassemble it. You put a little bit of grease on here because this piece should move freely right here. Okay, this piece should move freely. This is what operates your secondary throttle blades, and it's spring operated, right? So this should move freely. That's what runs that shaft to run that thing. Okay, but I got the base plate from the 350 Buick 4-speed. It's exactly the same as the stage one. It's actually the large one because it's a 71 carburetor, so it's the 800 CFM model. But here's what normally happens when you find Quadrajets when you're trying to rebuild a Quadrajet. Okay, and I don't know if I can do this with one hand while holding the camera. Okay, there, and you can't really see it too well, but we'll get down there. You hear that? That is about probably 10 thousandths worth of slop. And if you have ever troubleshot a Quadrajet, one of the biggest pains in the butt is trying to troubleshoot the vacuum leak around the throttle shaft. So what I did, and I can't do this with one hand, so we'll just leave it there. I got this kit from Quadrajet Power. Shout out to Quadrajet Power. You guys have a channel that's pretty awesome on YouTube, so if you want to check out some Q-Jet rebuilds and stuff, Quadrajet Power's got them. But they also have more than 500 subs, so they're eligible for the No Name Nationals if those guys want to come. I'll tag them in this video just so they know. But we're going to bush the shaft on this dude today. Not too hard. Your Quadrajet Power kit comes with a few of these bushings, and then you got a few of these screws, and there's probably, I think, probably 18 or 20 or something like that screws in there, and then probably about 10 bushings. But and then it comes with this drill bit. Okay, so this drill bit is actually shanked. If you look, it's the standard throttle shaft size, and then it steps up. So that way there's no, you can't really get the thing off center. You're already going through the pilot hole, which is the original shaft, and then you're opening it up here just so you can insert the shaft bushings. Okay, so you don't need a jig, you don't need nothing. You literally just buy this self-piloting drill bit, and you have at it. And then you knock in these bushings here, and you build a primary throttle shaft in your base plate that's actually going to hold some vacuum. So that's what we're going to do today. All right, so first things first is you want to have your completely disassembled your base plate here. This is a 71 model, right? You don't want to have anything in there because you are going to try to drill through the shaft, or through the housing for the shaft. So chuck your drill bit up and get to work. All right, so then you just drill it from the other side. Piece of cake, right? Now we're back. Putting the bushings in. These are the little brass bushings that actually bush the shaft. I don't know if you can even see them. There we go. It is somewhat focused. But these little brass bushings, they're a piece of cake. You install them. I do it like this. I take and Quadrajet Power tells you it's pretty much similar. It's just a 3/8 bolt with a nut on the end. And then what I do is I center it, the bushing, on the end of the 3/8 bolt. I just leave the nut on the end, and then you just press it in with a small machinist hammer. Okay, now your shaft is not going to fit in there immediately because this thing is not the exact right size, right? You just bushed it. But that's what the pilot bit is for, is to open it up to the exact right size. And then we're just gonna ream it out with this original bit. And there you go. It's that simple. Now you might have to make another pass or so. It is a bit tight right now, so I'm gonna try to just make another pass and open just a hair. But there's no more shaft play, there's no more wobble. This is the right way to do it. So I'm sure that my hackery way is not the same way that somebody else is gonna hack it in there. But and they're gonna call me out on it, I'm sure. But that's how you bush the shaft on a Quadrajet for the primary. So I'll go ahead, I'll make another pass, we'll put the primary shaft in, and then we'll install the blades. Secondary throttle blade shaft, yay! Now these throttle blades are directly out of my Berryman's carb dip. I found that that's probably the best way to do it, is just use some good old Berryman's. But what you need to do first and foremost, if you're gonna put the throttle blades in, is you try to center the shaft as best as possible. Okay, now you'll get it more refined when you put these in, but these do have a certain direction in which they go. And I usually go just by the witness marks of the previous, like you can see where the shaft rode on this one on the back side. And what I do know is the numbers generally go up when you're looking at it. So, and then they'll go towards the rear. Putting these little dinky screws in, you can barely even see them. They're so small. And be careful, you can tear them up. Now, what I do is Quadrajet Power tells you to Loctite these dudes. And I'm going to Loctite them, don't worry about that. But I also figured out a pretty simple, easy way to swedge the backside of them without having to peen them with a hammer and some kind of peening device on the far end. There's an easy, simple way. So get yourself some small needle nose, because it's really the only way I found to do this. Put just one drop of Loctite on it. What I do is I take the other screw and I go around it and I share some of the Loctite around. Drop that dude into place. Now, when you get the screw started, don't run it all the way down, because it's going to hold the thing in place. And you're going to have to make an adjustment on this. You take your other screw that you set off to the side, drop that dude in place. Now I just take it like one turn from the bottom, so it's not tight on anything, it's just sitting in there holding the throttle blade, because you have to adjust these when you get it done so it doesn't bind. You want to have a smooth operation, and you don't want your throttle to stick on you. Alright, so once you get your primary throttle blades in there, you'll want to make sure that they're centered, okay? The only way to really do that is by operation of the throttle shaft. I just tighten one screw at a time and see if it binds.
Get in there. Go in there. What? That's only one. God, I can't believe. Okay, now it's working good. Yeah.
Okay, so we got our primary throttle shaft in there and the primary throttle blades. It actually moves pretty easy. It is a little tight just because of the new bushings, but it's not bad. All right, so if you want to swedge them, here's the easy thing to do. Just flip it over to the back. The screw is protruding out the back, probably about a good 1/8 of an inch or so, okay? And from the factory, they swedge them with like a little peening machine, I guess. I don't know. But here's how I do it. Get a good old pair of trusty vice gripperoos. And all it does is flatten the screw out to where it's larger than the hole, and it can't come out now. They're flattened, they're swedged into place, and they're never coming out again. Now, you won't want to hit this with some like carb cleaner or anything like that after you've done this until that Loctite is set up, because it will just wash it right off. But now I'm going to go ahead and do the secondaries, and we're going to be good to go. Here's one thing to be aware of, okay? In the secondary, it doesn't really matter if it flops around a little bit. I mean, nobody really bushes the secondary because this is the one that gets to use like all the time. This is the one that's the primary, right? I mean, it's what you're using 99% of the time. This one, not so much, unless you're really lead-footed. But when you put this in, make sure that this tab is in the correct orientation. It needs to be facing to the front of the carburetor. Otherwise, you're gonna have a hell of a time putting it in. It's almost obvious when you put it together wrong, because what happens is the shaft is upside down, and then you'll end up putting the blades on the wrong side if you don't know what you're doing. But just make sure this is orientated to the front, and get ready to put your blades in. Okay, so for the secondary air door, you can see the witness mark on it right there. This is the side that had the shaft. Okay, and the numbers are on it's going to essentially be down, the downside. I believe it's probably numbers toward the rear, but I'll find out here in just a second. All right, so in this case, it's numbers towards the front. That's the only way to make it oriented correctly on this one. And I didn't mark them when I took them out. They only fit one way. Just take your time and put them in there. Generally, the witness mark tells you which side was the correct side for the shaft. But it's just, these things are off-centered. The holes are off-centered, so it's more one way than the other. But just keep fumbling around with it, and it'll eventually fall into place. Now, when you open and close it with the big secondary throttle blades, what happens? All these screws are loose, right? But it automatically centers itself somewhat. It makes a liar out of me now. But yeah, now it's centered itself. So what I do is tighten one screw at a time and make sure it's not bound. So there you go. Throttle shafts. So we're going to have to put the linkage back together now and then reassemble it all. All right, so there they are, swedged. They're really hard to get a hold of, them top ones, because the shaft is so much thicker, and then the blades themselves are thicker. Look at this. You can see the big difference, probably twice as thick. But yep, that's what caused them to be hard to get a hold of. That's why the Loctite and the swedging. So before I assemble this setup, this linkage setup, I like to grease this shaft a little bit. Just because this thing freely moves on here. Now I've already done that with the primary throttle shaft with all the pieces that move. There's no need to grease the center of the shaft because it gets gasoline on it and will essentially wash the grease right out. All right, so don't forget your small spring goes on the inside. So the first thing you're going to want to do is wind your inside spring. And the inside spring, it's just as easy as carrying it around to the other side. This one is a little bit more difficult. And what I do first is I line up, clock the spring and the shaft together easily first, let off of it, and then you wind the spring around. And now the outside spring needs to be wound, like you put it in there easily first, and then you wind it around. Now it doesn't go just this quarter turn, I don't think. Pretty sure it doesn't. Oh, yeah, it does. Just a quarter turn, right? So now the throttle linkage works the way it's supposed to. So now you can see how all that goes together. Right? Once you get past almost full position on your primaries, and the secondaries come open. Now they're not coming open all the way. That's just an adjustment. All right, so to adjust this secondary air door, you can see when you crank it all the way open, it doesn't go completely straight up and down. And that's what you want. You want close as you can to straight up and down. Okay? I found the easiest way to do it is you just adjust this rod. So this rod needs to be out a little bit further. That's it. Okay, so all I did was bend that rod a little bit to where the secondary air blades come all the way open. I don't know if you can see that. Before, they weren't coming all the way open. Now they're at a full 90 degrees. That's exactly what needs to happen. All right, well now we have ourselves a completed base plate. The springs and linkage and everything has been adjusted. The Throttle blade's been adjusted. Everything's ready to go. So now it's ready for reassembly on our carburetor. See you tomorrow.